David helps high-performing executives decode their body's signals to optimize health, sustain energy, and prevent burnout. His approach combines natural healing, individualized testing, and practical longevity to fuel resilience and high-level performance. Having fully recovered from his own health challenges, Matthew brings lived experience and precision strategies to transform clarity, vitality, and productivity. Welcome, Matthew. It's great to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Great, Sophie. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, okay, take us back to the turning point. So you've had this transformative journey from health depletion to regaining energy and strength. So take us back. What was the turning point where you realized that traditional health advice wasn't working for you?
So, going way back to like 2011, 2012 is when I first started having more noticeable digestive challenges, mostly like around food restrictions and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just kind of continued, and I did a little bit of the modern medical system, a little bit of testing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really came back of that. And then, but really, like the nature of this conversation is about the pinnacle in 2022, where I had like a total digestive shutdown, more or less.
Oh
Digestive
my
system
goodness.
really like stopped working.
Oh my goodness.
It was still working, because if it completely stopped working, I wouldn't be here. But it was
Yeah.
minimal, and my energy was like totally depleted. And just to kind of highlight where I was at that time, I remember going for like a 5-minute walk around my neighborhood and coming back and being totally depleted, like having to lay down. My body was on fire, no energy. Um, even like standing long enough to chop a batch of potatoes actually like was energetically depleting. So it was like the most bizarre experience of my life.
And had you been healthy before that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been managing the digestion for
Right.
years, right?
Right.
And I mostly worked with alternative healthcare people around like foods or supplements, things like that, trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Nothing ever really hit, but it was all helpful to a degree, right? Like,
Were you healthy as a child? Was there anything else, like a highly stressful job or something else you were dealing with?
well, I'd say like even going back to childhood, I did have the digestive
Okay.
situation to a smaller extent. And
Uh,
mainly like I've always just had a really sensitive system. Like my nervous
yeah.
system is hypersensitive, and I was sensitive to certain foods, but I had no idea about this, and my parents had no idea about this sort of thing, right? So it wasn't until, like I said, 2011, 2012, where it started getting a little more intense, that I had to start
Yeah.
eliminating like dairy and gluten and things like that.
Right.
And then it just kind of continued to this point where it's like just basically what happened. I had this balloon feeling in the lower right side of my abdominal, and I ended up going to the hospital for some testing, because immediately they think it's appendix related when you
Yes.
call them. It was not, and they did an ultrasound and nothing, and then they wanted to do some further tests, and intuitively I just felt like, no, I don't want to go down that road. But I still struggled with finding a solution, because I was working with actually two different healthcare practitioners at the time, and like neither really helped. One completely didn't help. Then I switched, and then it kind of helped a little bit, but not really. And then finally, I found this lady named Gloria. Probably been dealing with the situation for about 6 months. So this is probably towards the fall of 2022 where I found her, I think. And for the first time, actually found a solution as far as like eating the right foods, getting on the right supplements, and began a noticeable difference within 30 days. Ultimately, it took about a year to really like turn everything around, but that was the like turning point where I was like, okay, clearly, modern medicine in its current capacity for my situation doesn't have the answers. Even alternative people didn't have the answers. But I finally found that one thing that really was more individualized for myself.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. Okay. So how did you, what did you do? What was the solution? Or how did you even begin to figure out what the problem was?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a nutshell, Gloria had this really unique methodology of what I recall like precise individualized testing. And she never really explained to me exactly what it was. So we'll get to that later where I sort of figured it out on my own.
Mm.
But at the time, she was able to identify mainly like the right foods for my body,
Mhm.
without blood work or anything like that. And I'll explain a little bit how she does it, but it's unconventional. So I don't know if you or your audience have really necessarily heard of it, but I'll explain it a little bit more.
Okay.
And then she was also able to identify the right supplements, many of which I like had never even heard of before. And I
Mhm.
started taking them, and again, like within 30 days, noticed the difference. But basically, she had a process where somehow, and she'd been doing this for like 30 years,
Mhm.
she could, she had some kind of like tool that she used. And I have a tool that I use, which I'll talk about that later, but I don't know what she was using exactly, but she was able to.
Where did she go? Did she disappear into the Himalayas to meditate or what?
Exactly. No, she actually learned it from someone else,
Okay.
like she was like in her mid 70s when I met her.
Oh,
So
okay.
she'd been,
Wow.
had a similar thing in her 30s, and, fortunately learned this from someone. And so it's just real, like it's not mainstream at all. Like it's just
Yeah.
her, right? Like there's nobody else
Yeah.
out there really doing it, at least not exactly like this. Um, but anyway, I was able to identify like exactly what I needed to be putting in my body, exactly what I needed to stop putting in my body, and it
Mhm.
made a world of difference.
Wow.
And it's more based on like the energy system of your body, I guess, is an
Yeah.
easier way
Yeah.
to explain it. There's a methodology out there called biofeedback. It's not
Mhm.
exactly the same thing, but it's kind of parallel in terms of like it's picking up energetic signatures of the body, and then it's
Mhm.
also including the subconscious of the body, which is kind of where
Yeah.
all the answers are. But it's like, how do you actually access that effectively
Mhm.
and consistently? And she had found a way to do that through, again, using like this, what I'll show you what I use, but a similar like tool that you can buy for $20.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what are the roots of the health issues then that you were able to
Yeah.
what types of
So
things actually cause health issues from this worldview?
sure, sure. So this kind of led me down a path to something I originally heard about in 2017. So that was like where a seed was planted, but it didn't really make a lot of sense to me at the time. And then I later discovered this going on probably at least a year and a half ago now. Rediscovered it. It's called German New Medicine, GNM.
Okay.
And basically, it attributes like whatever physical symptoms you have are attributed to an emotional root, which isn't totally out of the norm. There's a lot of alternative views that say that, right? Like there's an emotional root cause, like a trauma in your childhood, and then it plays out physically, right? So that's not like necessarily a new concept. But what's particularly unique about German New Medicine is it says when you're having the physical symptoms, that's actually the healing process, right?
Oh,
Versus
that sounds very German.
yeah, it's complete opposite to what like modern medicine is. Like if you have inflammation that's bad, we have to resolve your inflammation, right? Whereas
That's so
German medicine would say
interesting.
inflammation is part of the healing process. So it's
Yeah.
actually good that you have
It's
it.
engineered that way. Like my mom's German, so I'm allowed to speak with a German accent.
Oh, okay,
But
very nice.
yeah, I can like see the German thought process. It's like,
Right. Okay. Well,
no, there's a purpose, and you must go through this process. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
hilarious. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's ironic, but
Interesting.
yeah, so that really flipped the whole script because when I started to realize, okay, like because I was under a lot of fear and anxiety just around all the health
Yeah.
challenges and the feelings and the discomfort, etc. But understanding, okay, it's actually part of
Your
the
body's
healing
healing.
process. And Gloria was great too. Like whenever I get
Yeah.
like a hang of fear or whatever, I'd like call her or text her and she would like help me through it. So that was a blessing. But eventually I just realized on my own, like, wow, okay, no matter what discomfort I'm having, it's actually a good thing. And it's
Wow.
not something I have to like fix. It's actually part of the natural healing process, provided I'm putting the right nutrients in my body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first component. But just to get to your question, like what was the more emotional root cause? Like for example, in 2020, my fiance passed away from cancer,
Wow.
5-year relationship.
Wow.
Um, and
So sorry.
oh, thank you. Yeah. And so that kind of was coupled with unstable living conditions. So even like up to that time, I was mostly living with my family, also with her, and then she passed away, so that kind of changed things quite a bit. So I didn't really have stable living conditions for a period of time. But even prior to that, going back to childhood, for example, I never had emotionally stable living conditions. So this experience of 2022 was sort of a culmination of all that, right? Like I was codependent on my family financially up until, around up, well, kind of up until that point to a degree, give or take a year. And then again, I never had that emotional stability. So all this was transitioning from being in like a stress mode, like a fight or flight mode, where it actually started gaining more financial stability and kind of just had more of a foundation for myself for the first time ever in my life.
Amazing. Yeah.
So naturally, again, according to GNM, that's when your body actually can resolve the conflicts because it's no longer under that under
What?
stress.
Whoa, that's a totally different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you've been in stress for a long time and you thought you were relatively healthy, and then you start to have a bunch of physical symptoms, it could be that you've achieved enough stability that your body can go through this healing process. That's the theory.
I would personally argue it's not that it could be, it's a fact that it is.
Oh,
There are some nuances with that, right? Like depending on what the symptoms are, how they're showing up. Because there's also something called a hanging healing where you temporarily enter that healing phase. So you get symptoms, but then maybe you reactivate the stress or a trigger, or, for example, alcohol can temporarily activate the
oh,
resolution, but then it's artificial, right? You haven't actually resolved it. You just kind of
yes.
temporarily relax the nervous system, and then it re-triggers and you're in stress again. So there's a lot of nuances with it, but in general, if you're experiencing symptoms of any kind, it usually means you're in some kind of healing phase.
That's an amazing worldview. That's so different from
Yeah.
what American hospitals or, doctors would tell you, for example.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, you mentioned, and this kind of makes more sense now, that your body is your partner. So tell us a little more about what that means.
Yeah. So kind of just leading into that, right? Like healing, sometimes when people see that, particularly an executive or a top performer, they can maybe feel like that's a setback or a failure. Like, what am I
Yeah.
not doing? What do I not understand? Things like that. But it's actually, again, it's your body finally restoring balance. So that's leading into like, how is your body your partner? Well, it's always talking to you, but not like this. It's talking to you through like emotions, obviously, but then also the physical symptoms. So
Hmm.
the symptoms themselves are actually just feedback in terms of where are at. So obviously, like fight or flight, most of us know what that feels like. You're under stress, you're
Hmm.
under a deadline, whatever the case is, and that can be positive or negative, right? Like there's positive stress, but in this context, we're probably talking more about negative stress,
Yeah.
and it being like utilized in a transformative way and kind of building up. But when that finally subsides, that's when your body is actually able to relax and go into at least a temporary healing state. So the symptoms are actually feedback. They're not weakness, or it's not really a problem. Like I gotta take an aspirin to fix this, or I gotta go on a cleanse to fix this, or I mean, sometimes actually like just go like some people like do the cleanses like juicing, or they go
Yeah.
like meat or protein because
Yeah.
they're like I want to, but that's actually, at least from my view in Germany medicine, it's the worst thing you can do because in those times is when your body needs more protein because protein is responsible for healing during the resolution and healing phase.
Wow. 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 So, uh, being an immigration lawyer, it's a very, tumultuous type of situation to be in. And then, I'm a business owner and a founder, and I started my law firm when I was going through a divorce, and I had little kids, so had a lot of stress for many, many, many years. And a couple years ago, I moved to a new house where I thought I could finally relax. And then all these health symptoms started happening. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to figure out, is it because it's an old house? Is there something in the water? Is it, is it something in the air? Is it something in the walls? What
Yeah.
happened? Why have I been having these symptoms? But I guess under German New Medicine and what you're saying, it's like, no, you finally got to a place of safety
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
your body can actually go through the healing process.
Yep. Yeah, pretty
That's
much that's
mind
it.
blowing. Okay.
Yeah, I had this one experience, which was a great demonstration of how it all works. About probably like 6 months ago, as you know, we'll get into. I go to the gym a lot,
Mhm.
7 days a week, and again, one particular morning where I was a little groggy, I dropped a 10 pound weight on my foot, and I don't wear shoes in the gym, so like right on my sock foot,
Oh,
and it hurt, as you can imagine. But after like I got the adrenaline thing, finished my workout, came home, and and then it didn't really bother me until like 5 or 6 p.m. And then the inflammation started and the swelling
yeah.
started. And oh my God,
Yeah.
like it was terrible. And I was gonna try and not do ice. But then I'm like, I gotta do ice. So I did ice, and like but it only took about a week to heal. But going through that initial conflict, which would have been when I dropped the weight on my foot, right?
Yeah.
Conflict mode, fight or flight,
Yeah.
adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
Lasted until about 5 or 6, so roughly 10 hours. And then the healing phase started, the inflammation, the swelling, etc. And then that continued for about a week. So that having that experience, I just realized the body has a natural biological healing process that it
Mhm.
goes through. And when you don't have fear, because I reached a point of pain where I'm like, crap, I got to call the hospital. This is so bad, right? Which I mean, what are
Yeah.
they going to do anyway? It's just, you know,
Wow.
but um, but and partly what I'll get into later with the testing, I'm able to also derive like, hey, I don't actually, it's not an emergency, right? It's just fear.
Mhm.
And then realizing that, and then again, it healed quite quickly, right, within a week. So, just going through that, I realized the body's going through its own natural thing, and most things it's going to take care of. And kind of a sidebar, I guess, but like I would hypothesize that like the healthcare system would probably be like 10 to 20% of what it actually is if people understood the natural biological process that I've described, and didn't have that fear associated it, because I think it's really that fear that
Yeah.
exacerbates a lot of it.
Wow. Yeah. Like, oh, something happened. Quick, go to the hospital, call the doctor, figure it out. And it's like, no, it's fine. Oh, okay, great. But not like,
Or when they go and there is a problem or there's a diagnosis, right?
yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how far we want to get into that, but often things are like misdiagnosed or misunderstood. And
Yeah.
then it just propagates more fear and it re-triggers stress, and then they're in fight or flight again. And then the body can't go through a proper resolution, and then they might inject like chemicals or whatever into the
Right.
body,
Right.
and then it's like in this environment that it actually can't really heal. So again, that's a bit of a
Wow.
sidebar, but when you just understand like, hey, fear is actually the biggest culprit to this.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then clarity, of course, right? Because now hey, it's not my house, it's not the water. It's like my body's actually finally healing what it's accumulated over the past however many years.
Yeah. Yeah. This is incredible. I'm gonna have to sit with that and give
Yeah.
that some thought. That's really
Yeah. It
amazing.
took me it took me about a year to shift my mindset to really get it. Like, because another kind of crazy thing about this, which again, I don't know how far you want to go into this sidebar, but the German New Medicine posits that like germs and bacteria infections are actually part of the healing process, right? Not contagious, which sounds crazy. I understand that. Um, but when you get that, and you just allow your body to go through what it needs to go through, then you're not trying to like protect yourself from other things either, right? Like it just becomes
Yeah.
much easier to navigate the world. But it took me about a year to really wrap my mind around that, because we're so conditioned to believe the opposite, right? My body's vulnerable, it's going to catch things. I gotta, sanitize like
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
the fact is, your body is resilient and doesn't need to do that stuff. But if you have a fear about it, that can certainly propagate having
Oh,
symptoms.
wow. Well, and then what about stress? So is stress the opposite of health, or like what do we do with stress when we're, high performing
Yeah.
people and demanding jobs? How much stress should we have, or what type of stress? What's the difference with that and burnout?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about resilience, right? And again, we're going to get into the weight training a little bit more, but the more resilient your body is, the more stress you can handle in a positive way. Are you familiar with Wim Hof, the
Yeah.
Iceman?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's
I
putting his
tried doing that. I made my back hurt for a week. I couldn't walk. So
yeah, yeah. So like he's obviously putting his body under a huge level of stress, but he can
yeah,
handle it because he's
yeah,
built up to that. So
yeah,
that's where you have to pay attention to the signals because you can adapt, right? Like my body was obviously
yeah,
hypersensitive 3 years ago.
yes,
And
yes.
now, I'm working out a bunch and I work like 7 days a week and like it's great, but I
Mhm.
love it, right?
And for those who don't know, Wim Hof is this Dutch guy who's nicknamed the Iceman, who can sustain himself in really low temperatures and does ice baths and all sorts of things. Has a breathing technique. Yeah, it takes a lot to adjust to something like that if you're not used to it.
Totally. So it's the same idea with chronic stress, right? In
Oh.
executives. So if you're ignoring the signals that your nervous system is giving you, and your body's giving you, then it will go into like a more extreme healing phase. And I wrote an article recently on LinkedIn about Ariana Huffington, and how she had a collapse, in regards to, and this was in 2007.
Hmm.
She collapsed from exhaustion, hit her head on her desk. She broke her cheekbone. And like the surface reason was because she was only sleeping like 3 or 4 hours a night, right? And she was like constantly
Mhm.
pushing, striving, trying to hold it all together. But from a German new medicine standpoint, this was actually a forced biological reset where her body was like, okay, you've gone too far, like you can't go any further. And so it basically forces a breakdown. And then part of that breakdown is again related to different inner conflicts. So when you're in that conflict mode, um, like for example, one of the things she likely had is like territorial fear. So that's based on like her company or leadership role, her schedule, right? Her time, her commitments, her
Mhm.
mental space, just that she had to be on high performance all the time and feel like she was in control, and her sense of personal safety being tied to performance. So all those things play into like a territorial fear. And
Mhm.
eventually it builds up to a point, at least in her case, where it's like, okay, we need to do a reset. Um, but most people would look at that and think like, oh, now I have to fix the problem. From a German new medicine standpoint, saying actually the problem's already been fixed. You just have to
Wow.
now go through the healing process. And then what happened in her case is she came out on the other side, had a breakthrough, created something called Thrive Global.
Yeah, I've
And
written there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's all about being dedicated to well-being and resilience. So it's a huge positive thing when that stuff happens. Obviously, when you're going through it, it's very uncomfortable.
Doesn't feel like healing when you're going through it.
Yeah, but on the other side, and you look back, and when you understand that and have clarity of how it works, then you're like, wow, that was actually a good thing. Not that I have to do it again because I understand it more, but all of this is very positive if you understand exactly what's happening.
Well, and so this is the first time I'm learning about any of this, so it's all new to me. But even just if all you did was assume for the sake of the argument um that this is true, like even just the placebo effect is such a strong thing. So even if all you did was just substitute a belief that when you're going through something and your body's going through some sort of process, it's a healing process, not like a suffering process. Even simply changing that belief would probably reduce one's fear so much that even that alone would probably have a tremendous impact on health as
And I can
well.
testify to that because I've been through it myself the past 3 years, right? And going through immense amounts of fear and anxiety about my body. But yeah, removing that and understanding that and having clarity on it's not that it necessarily goes away. Maybe at
Yeah.
some point you entirely eliminate fear. That's enlightenment, I guess, right? Then you've won the game of life, maybe. But it's still a process. But when you understand it that way, then it just like reduces the buildup. And then you can just get on with things too, because you're not like stuck worrying about it or being having your performance affected by it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And you mentioned your strength training. Let's talk about that. So, what's your strength training regimen and how has it helped your mental clarity and your performance?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for the longest time, I couldn't even lift like 10 pounds. My
Wow.
abdominal area, my digestive system was just like so inflamed. So whatever was going on with that, like literally trying to lift 10 pounds put way too much stress on it. So I went from that, and it took me about a year and a half working with Gloria, where things were sustainable. And I started just like initially with like body weight and stretching at home. And then about a year and a half ago now, I started lifting weights again. And so I've been doing that like virtually every day for the last year and a half.
Mm.
And again, you have to do it in the right order though, because if I tried that earlier, I just couldn't have done it.
Right,
So
right.
weight training is, from my perspective and my experience, incredibly helpful, but you have to do it the right way for your body too,
Hmm.
which is, its own process of discovery. But yeah, lifting like, heavier weight or going to like maximum reps, going to failure, things like that really increased my energy and resilience.
Hmm.
And then also, like, I work in sales, so it has a tremendously positive impact on my performance
Yeah.
with that as well. I'm like showing up to sales calls with more energy, more clarity, and more leadership. So it has a positive effect everywhere, but I had to do it in the right order because otherwise I would have just like burnt myself out or just repeated like a conflict mode
Hmm.
rather than like putting my body in positive stress and building resilience.
Yeah, wow. And tell us about this testing you do and this device and
Yeah.
what are these all these testing methods and how do
Yeah,
they work?
so this has been like a lifelong thing almost to figure out. Well, at least in my adult life, because in 2012, I think it was, I was introduced to something called muscle testing.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Okay.
But maybe our listeners are not. So if you could describe it, please.
Yeah, well, muscle test, I mean, there's a variety of ways to do it. But basically you're testing the strength of your muscle, and you can ask it like a yes or no question. And if it's strong, it's typically a yes. If it's weak, it's a no. So like back in the day, I worked with a healthcare person where I'd be on a like a table, and then he'd test my using like my legs, right? Because it's like the strongest muscle, so it was easier for it not to get worn out testing. And basically like he'd press down on your, and it's a skill, right? Like it sounds kind of hokey when you're first hearing about it, and like how is that replicatable or how's that scientific? But
Yeah.
it's a skill just like anything. Like you're going to learn accounting, you're going to learn law. Like these are all skills you have to have an in-depth, knowledge of to really understand. So it's the same idea. But anyway, he could more or less derive like a yes or no response based on like a food or supplement that may or may not be best for you.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
anyway, even with that individual I worked with and my trying it myself, I never got consistency. Right.
Hmm.
So it just, I'm like, whatever. Like, I wish it worked. I tried
Yeah.
it so many times over the years, but it just was never consistent.
Yeah.
So I'm like, forget it. And then again, I'm not exactly sure how Gloria did it, but along the way, there were all these seeds planted for me. So actually, back in 2014, um, I got these. Well, I'll just show them to you. I don't know if people see it, but you'll see these are called dowsing rods.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's basically, look, you could literally use a metal hanger. It's like an L-shaped rod.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and you just hold them like in both hands, and then you can derive yes or no responses. And again, it's a skill. Don't, if you just go try it and it doesn't work, you'll think it's ridiculous. And I thought that myself, trying it. But anyway, I got these things initially in 2014, and then they just kind of sat around in my like storage for
Hmm.
years. And I think I may have kind of played around with them and tried to figure it out, but never really did. And then um, about a year and a half ago, I had a friend of mine who, sidebar, ironically, I met him when I lived out in Ontario. And now I live in Vancouver, Canada area,
Hmm.
and he's actually like 30 minutes away from me. So that was kind of ironic, just as far as like putting the puzzle pieces together. But he is into like energy medicine and all this alternative stuff. And he had this like different tool, but he was showing it to me on the screen on a Zoom call. And I'm like, something just clicked. And I'm like, I think I might be able to use those rods to test for food and supplements. It was just kind of an intuitive thought. And I started trying it. And lo and behold, I was getting the same responses that I was getting from Gloria. So that's how I was able to kind of verify, right?
Oh, interesting.
Because what
Yeah.
she'd given me obviously worked, right? Like I've been
Yeah.
doing it for a year and a half. And then I was able to get like the same
You're Really.
dosages for supplements and foods. And like when I try the
Oh,
things, it wouldn't go. I'm like, wow.
wow.
So I just tried that for months, right? And got,
Um,
because it's all about consistency. As long as you can replicate it, then it's reliable, right?
yeah.
So I done that, and I now I've used it on my own for like the past year or longer, and say like my health has continued to thrive, and I've made adjustments to my food and my supplements because I continue to strengthen or things change, but I haven't been like codependent on her.
Yeah.
Because that's disempowering too. I mean, you want to find that first step so someone can help you, of course,
Yeah,
but to,
I had a Gloria and she retired and then my health
yeah.
went down.
Exactly. Then what happens? What do you do? Right.
Yeah.
So this was really fortunate that I figured it out, and it's been great for myself, and I've been able to help other people in my life to a degree, just as far as, giving them the right food recommendations. That obviously they have to take the initiative and implement the plan.
Right, right.
But that's kind of become my passion now, is like, how can I help others apply this? Uh,
Hmm.
because it's not readily available, right? Like, in fact, to some people, this might sound completely hokey or ridiculous, but
Yeah.
it works. And for
Wow.
the right person that's open to it, it can really be transformative.
And have you been able to expand the foods that you're able to eat? Or how do you approach your diet as a result
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
information
So
and
short
testing?
answer, that's no. And,
Okay.
and that's, I see that as a positive thing. I'll explain exactly what I mean. My whole life, up until 2011, 2012, I ate pretty much like what you'd expect in, Western diet, but a lot of it did not really work for me, but I just didn't know. I
Yeah.
still had a lot of, digestive challenges, but I just didn't know why. And then
Thought it was
started
normal.
figuring that out a little bit.
Yeah.
But even like, for example, before Gloria, I was eating a lot of quinoa, which you kind of
Hmm.
think, whole grain. It's got carbs, it's got protein.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be good. No, not for me, right? Maybe for someone else, right? Like, I've tested it
Yeah.
with others and it's fine, but for me, my body just doesn't like it. My body prefers white rice as a grain, right?
Wow.
Which
Wow.
again, for others may not be the best option, but for me, it's
Yeah.
what my body can digest. And then for a while I was doing like chicken and beef and fish, and then over time chicken and beef was kind of irritating my nervous system, and I was
Mm.
able to test for that, because rather than keep like force feeding it and having,
Yeah.
oh, is it something like, because I used to like randomly have digestive inflammation or whatever and not
Yeah.
know why. And that's
Yeah.
really frustrating, because it's like, well, what do I just eliminate every food and then add it back
Yeah.
in? Or like, well, how do
Yeah.
I manage that? Right.
Yeah.
But with this, I was able, okay, yeah, beef is not working for me. Chicken's not working for me. I can confirm that through testing over days or weeks or months, right? And
Mhm.
then fish is fine, like salmon and cod and haddock. That's what I eat. I eat white rice, eat sweet potato. I eat, some mushroom, onion, olive oil, dates, salt. That's more or less my diet. There's a few more things that I can eat in there, but I stick to the same few things 3 times a
Yeah.
day because it works and I have no issues with it. And I'm so
Well, you've had
grateful
this
that I
amazing
found that.
healing journey given that, and your strength has improved,
Yeah,
mental clarity,
exactly.
all of those things.
Exactly. So that may sound limiting to some, and that's okay, because your body probably doesn't need it to be that restricted, right? That's something we
Mhm.
can test for. But
Mhm.
for me, I'm happy to eat that way because I don't have issues. I'm healing and I feel good. And I've
Yeah.
never, up until like a year and a half or 3 years ago when I started Gloria, I never really had that consistently.
Mm. Do you continue? Because I'm on a elimination diet as well, and I'm just curious. I still have sugar cravings or other types of cravings for some of those
Mm.
foods that I haven't eaten in a really long time. It's like so hardwired into my brain. So I'm just curious if you experience that.
No, I like really like dates.
Yeah.
So I'll have like 3 dates before breakfast,
Yeah.
three before dinner. If you have fruit before dinner, usually it eliminates the late night sugar cravings.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will start having my dates before dinner instead of after, like I
Exactly.
normally
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, they digest that so much better too, right? So
Oh, okay. Cool. I didn't know that.
yeah.
So what are some of the signals that people should learn how to recognize that their bodies are sending to them?
Yeah, I mean, typical things that affect performance, right, is like brain fog, or maybe like inconsistent recovery. Maybe like, if, like, for example, for me, kind of sidebar a little bit, but I injured my lower back in the gym like 3 months ago now, and it basically just I had a heavy weight, and I had my technique I was using. I was kind of trying something, and it just like something didn't work, just to
Mhm.
put it that way. Um, and normally the next day I'd be fine, but like
Mhm.
it took like almost 2 months to really kind of ease up, and now it's still in like a healing phase. But according to German New Medicine, particularly associated with me, which is more on the right hip side, which is related to like financial foundation, also related to like partnership, like romance. So like being able to be a financial provider, which is kind of a theme I've been exploring a lot more in depth the past 6 months.
Mhm.
So the correlation of that is like it wasn't just an injury, quote unquote, that, because I lifted too much weight or whatever. It's not like that. It's like prior to that was the conflict related around, subconsciously about being a provider. Now it's coming to a conscious surface level where I can actually resolve it, right? Given like I'm earning more and like I'm just in a different position, but it's not necessarily like fully resolved. So it's in the healing phase. But what that represents is like, hey, I'm kind of in this hanging healing phase of resolving, having a financial foundation enough to support my partner, for example.
Mhm. Mhm.
So inconsistent recovery is not because, oh, I didn't stretch, or, oh, I did the wrong exercise or whatever. It's not like that. That's kind of the surface level
Mhm.
uh, reflection that happens when there's something underlying that's in that healing phase. If
Wow.
that makes sense. So noticing things like that, um, emotional swings is kind of an obvious one, right? But again, those are just signs that there's something that is likely entering a healing phase, because you don't necessarily notice it when you're in fight or flight. Because if you think about fight or flight as like I'm running for my life from a lion,
Yeah.
right? You don't have time to notice those things. So when you slow down and recover like you are in your house,
Yeah.
then you start to see those symptoms. So by paying attention to that and understanding it, that's how you can really start to recognize like when those signals are present.
Wow. And then how does all of this turn into clearer thinking and better decision making when you're under pressure?
Yeah. So there's a couple elements to that. I think number one is when you're paying attention to those signals. Um, you may have to have a major breakdown like Ariana did, right? Like that might just be what your script is, so to speak, right?
Okay.
And so there's no point in trying to not like resist that experience, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But when you have the awareness like we're talking about now, then you can start to make changes, right? So whether it's to your food, whether it's to your routine, whether it's to how you delegate things, whether it's just mentally resolving something because you're seeing it differently, right? Like the fear of germs, for example, if you suddenly are realizing, wait a sec, maybe they're not contagious, not saying you need to believe that, but if you start to
Mhm.
consider that and you don't have fear about it anymore, it's a total shift in your perception, as an example.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
regardless,
I've like tried that with my kids, right? Like if you just tell your child that even though one person in the household is sick, but that doesn't mean they're going to get it and they'll be fine because they believe they're healthy,
yeah,
your child will just stay healthy. So,
yeah, and when they do, when everyone in the household does get sick, it's usually related to the whole family resolving some kind of conflict, because the quote unquote sick symptoms of a cold are
uh-huh.
just healing symptoms related to a resolved conflict or
Wow.
conflict. So, um, again, I would qualify everything I'm saying as like a working hypothesis, but
Yeah.
through observation, and you notice it and you experience it like I have, it's like, wait, maybe this is how it actually works, right? Maybe there is a natural biological process the body handles. And if I don't have fear involved in how I perceive it, everything just works out fine.
That's amazing.
So the breakdown is actually still positive, right? Because like in Ariana's case, she still ended up creating that Thrive Global.
Hmm.
So even if you're paying attention to the signals and you're trying your best and things are still seemingly breaking down, they might need to, right? That might just be part of your life journey. And
Hmm.
so accepting that too, but also being proactive about it is kind of the balance in terms of how to really use those body signals to their utmost advantage.
Wow. And is there a book you recommend reading about this?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
But what I would recommend is using ChatGPT and typing in German new medicine and just doing as
Okay.
much research as you can on it. Because
Interesting.
there's a website dedicated to it, which is quite good, and there's a lot of videos on there, and it forms a good foundation.
Uh-huh.
I think it's like gnm.org or germannewmedicine.org, something like that.
Uh-huh.
But ChatGPT is pulling from every source on the internet, so you get a much deeper context for how to actually apply it and how it's more relevant to your situation. So over the last year, I've just dived in. So what might have taken someone like even 5 or 10 years to figure out in the past,
Yeah.
it's if you know how to use AI, like
Yeah.
it's a huge advantage.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay. And then if somebody who's listening wants to optimize their energy, their longevity, their resilience, what's just one practical change that is accessible that somebody could start making today?
Okay, if people literally weren't prepared to necessarily do things differently, but maybe just think differently, it's
Mm.
just seeing those symptoms as signals, not setbacks. So rather than feeling, oh, I'm sick, what did I do? What germs did I catch? Hey, maybe what conflict am I resolving, right? And then look back, oh, there was this thing that finally resolved, and now I felt some relief, and maybe my body's just resolving that. And the nice thing about that is when, even if it's a common cold, quote unquote, when that resolves, your body typically is rebuilding tissue to be more resilient for the next time it encounters something similar. So it's adapting. So just understanding that natural process, even if you literally do nothing different with your food or your supplements or your exercise, just having that different mindset about what symptoms mean is a total game changer.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I have another question. What are some of the supplements that you had never heard of that you got exposed to through learning about all this?
Oh, great question. Okay, so the number one thing that I was not taking,
Mm.
well, but I had taken probiotics in the past.
Okay.
I'll mention a few. I had taken probiotics in the past, but the practitioner that I was working with at the time um, suggested not to take them based on his testing methodology, which was clearly the wrong thing to do. And then shortly after that is when this whole thing like exacerbated in
Oh, wow.
2022. Not saying it's his fault, but that wasn't helping.
Yeah. Yeah.
So understanding, the right probiotics to take for your body. Like for me, most of the supplement brand that I recommend is Natural Factors. So these are things you can just get on Amazon, right? Like you don't need any crazy multi-level marketing, high price stuff. It's just, this is on Amazon. It's affordable, literally couple of $200 probably will cover you for 3 to 6 months for most
Oh,
things. So it's very affordable. But big one is the omega-369.
mm.
That's one pretty much everyone should be taking. Most men need zinc. Sometimes women, I think too, but mostly that comes up for men. Vitamin D is usually a big one. B12 is usually a big one. B complex can be a big one as well. Just like if people drink alcohol, that usually kills or disturbs gut flora and digestive enzymes and things like that. So B complex helps with that. Or sure, if there's a high sugar diet or like high gluten diet, B complex helps with that. One of the biggest ones that helped me, because when I was going through this whole thing, my blood sugar was totally messed up. And I get these like weird, like pressure feelings in the back of my head, neck and head, and like I could barely focus and like barely even talk. It was the strangest thing. But I was taking, it's called pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5. Not saying everyone needs that, but for me, that was like total game changer.
Amazing.
Um, and then let's see, what's another one? Glucosamine. Most people know what that is, so it kind of just helps with joints and bones. What was another? Oh, these two were the what there's a handful that like I couldn't live without. And
Mm.
because of my digestive issues, taking betaine, which is basically like stomach acid, because my
Mm.
body's not doesn't produce enough of it, so I can actually
Mhm.
digest fish, where like even like 4 years ago, like I had a lot of issues with that. And then digestive enzymes as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So those were big ones. So there's
Super
a fair
helpful.
amount of others here, but just really learning about them, understanding them. And these aren't things you have to take every day. That was the other preconception that Gloria really helped me understand. Some of them you take once a day, but some of them you
Mhm.
take like 2 or 3 times a week, right? So you take them like every other day. So even though I
Mhm.
have a lot of supplements that I take, I'm not necessarily taking like 20 a day, right? So,
Okay.
because otherwise it seems super overwhelming and like,
Yeah.
how am I going to fit all that in? Well, you don't have to. And again, I'm probably taking more than the average person just because
Yeah.
my body's in a deep healing state. But there's probably at least 5 or 6 that most people could benefit from.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess just staying organized and getting those little boxes where you sort them all, and you just create systems for it, just like anything else.
Totally. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And then last question, Matthew. Um, what is what's been something that's helped you power through challenging times?
Um, well, I think just in the context of like going through that health endeavor back in 2022 was having a support system. So at the time was Gloria, and then just having the desire to succeed or the desire to get better, the desire to figure it out. I think those were the two underlying factors that really helped me get through it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and also so many of your lessons. It's very valuable. And I know I have a lot of notes of things I'm going to research, and probably our listeners will as well. So thank you. And we're going to include your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. But you're open to chatting with people about this, right?
Totally. Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
great.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, share this episode with a friend who's maybe going through a health thing, and you can give them a different perspective on what they might be experiencing. We appreciate you listening, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening.